Hello and welcome to the SustainabiliTREE podcast with me, Katie.
And me, Mike. In SustainabiliTREE, we will explore all things trees and woodlands with a specific focus on the issue of plastics within the forestry sector.
In each episode, we will be looking at a variety of topics around this theme, including woodland creation, funding streams, plastic pollution, deer, soils, ecology, and so much more.
Shall we get started, Katie?
Let's go! Hello and welcome to a surprise bonus episode of the SustainabiliTREE podcast. In celebration of Recycling Week 2024, we thought we would jump into your ears to chat about what we can do in the forestry, conservation and ecology sector to get recycling. Recycling Week this year runs from the 14th to the 20th of October, where you can get involved in all things recycling with the organisation Recycle Now. It's in its 21st year, and this annual event highlights how important it is for us to recycle and think about the waste that we all produce. So, hello, Mike. We're back again.
We are. How are you doing, Katie?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad at all.
This is one of our favourite topics, recycling, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes us sound incredibly drab.
No,
Doesn't
yeah.
it?
we do. We like other things too. No, it's just interesting and it's important.
Yeah, it is important. I think there's a couple of sentences you said in your introduction there that are really important to me. You know, I think everybody knows it's important to recycle. You know, we need to transition to a circular economy, and we should all be, you know, it's a lot easier to recycle these days, isn't it? The things that we use, but it's that kind of thinking about the waste that we produce as well. There seems to have been a bit of a change in society about actually looking at the amount of waste we produce. You know, at one of my local supermarkets now, you know, you're given a paper bag instead of a plastic one, and you know that's what like my mum tells me that's what they used to do when they were kids. It was all paper bags and things like that. So yeah, for me, we're just not moving quick enough. But yeah, it's really important to recycle, obviously for several reasons, Kate. You know, it reduces the need for landfill. That's probably pretty obvious, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And other costly forms of disposal. It also reduces the need for extracting, such as mining, quarrying and logging, you know, refining, all them raw materials which make those kind of, especially when it comes to packaging, you know, kind of make those new packages. And you know, you think about the air and water pollution that comes from that as well. Yeah,
it's so, we don't even realise, do we, when we use something, how much energy and stuff has gone into making it. It's quite mind-boggling.
It's scary as well. And you know, I mentioned that circular economy, and you know, at least if we kind of reuse stuff, we don't have to add to that kind of that burden on the planet already. And you know, I think when you look at the energy that recycling saves as well, you know, I've got a stat in front of me, you know, that saves about 10 to 15 million tons of carbon emissions a year recycling in the UK, and that's the equivalent of taking 3.5 million cars off the road. And stats like that are important, aren't they? You know, because it actually, you know, brings home how important these things are.
Yeah, definitely. We should, you know, look at the end of life of something. When we buy something or use it, think, what are we going to do with it when we no longer need it? Like, is it just going to sit there being that forevermore? As we know, especially with plastic, you know, it will last for centuries. Or do we recycle it and let it have a new life? So, yeah, it's as with everything we talk about on this podcast, it's complex.
Yeah, it is. I was listening to a podcast the other day that... I'd have to try and find the exact. It's come from a tribe somewhere that says that they think 7 generations ahead whenever they do anything.
Wow.
You know, they use a product, or you know, I guess, you know, fell in an area of woodland or anything like that. They're thinking about the impact seven generations ahead. I don't even think we think 2-3 weeks ahead sometimes with how we with how we use things. But you know, let's not get too down, Katie. You know, there are things out there that you know, especially in the sector that we work in, you know, we can do some good things. So yeah, I guess, you know, the question is, you know, what sort of waste do we produce in the forestry sector, and what we can do about it.
So apart from all the generic day-to-day things that we use as people when working in our jobs, specifically in like the environmental sector, to to help us reach certain goals and things, we need to use certain objects. So for instance, if you're doing a ecological wildlife survey, you might need to use a felt tile for surveying reptiles, or we use plastic bottles for trapping newts. And these are all things that you can recycle at your local recycling centre, or you can reuse and things. But in forestry and conservation, we use different objects, don't we, that we need to create certain habitats or grow trees. And these are things, as we've spoken about a lot on this podcast, such as tree shelters and fencing, or even putting up, signage to engage people with the site that they're at, if it's a nature reserve or something. And that's, made out of a material, whether that be wood, plastic, or metal. So, these are all things made from all sorts of different materials that we only use once. And that's once, whether it's like a short period of time or once for decades, or we use it a handful of different times for different things. But we are ultimately putting these things out of the environment. And then there's a huge problem when these things are left and forgotten.
Yeah, you're right, Katie, and what you said there about most of the things that we consume, we can recycle at a local recycling centre, doorstep collections as well. I think that's one thing that councils across the country have got really good at, isn't it? Is that being able to do doorstep recycling, so you don't have to kind of queue up and get into your local recycling centre. But when it comes to kind of fencing and tree guards, it is difficult to get these items recycled, and a lot of that's down to knowledge as well. I'm sure if I turned up with 2,000 tree guards at my local recycling centre, I think it's probably really difficult for the people who are operating that centre to decide to what box it goes into, what skip it goes into as well. And then you look at kind of the things that are used on farms as well, and then there's a number of recycling companies and organizations that have got together to recycle farm waste. You think about the kind of the miles and miles of silage wrap and things like that. But tree shelters are difficult to recycle because they're a particular type of plastic, and there's several different types of, I would say, traditional plastic tree shelter out there. There's the hard green plastics that you get out there, to the, I guess, more ubiquitous, can we say, light green standard shelter that's out there, and also they're pretty dirty as well. And I know that you've removed tubes, and they do get a bit of a bad situation, don't they? So some of them need to be
full of mud and ants and everything.
Yeah, we're being polite there. Full of cattle and things like that. So they need to be cleaned as well. So thankfully for landowners and people who do own kind of look after woodlands, there is a way of getting tree shelters recycled now, so you don't have to kind of have that difficult conversation at your local recycling centre when you've got 2,000 tree shelters that are covered in various bits of cattle dung. So what the Forest Plastic Working Group has done alongside it, the various kind of member organisations, is help set up a number of recycling hubs across mostly England and Wales, and that is also in partnership with Tubax as well. So the new UKFS states that the UK Forestry Standard states that tubes should be removed when they've kind of reached their, well, it is a little bit ambiguous, isn't it, Katie? But it's effectively when they are redundant, and I guess the interpretation to that is what's classed as redundancy in a tree shelter. And we might do a podcast episode on that a little bit in the future. But basically, once your tree has outgrown that tube, then that tube should be removed. And I guess historically they were shoved in a plastic bag and taken to probably landfill or left on a farm somewhere, which isn't ideal. So what the Plastic Working Group has done, mainly through the work of Yorkshire Millennium Trust, is to set up a series of recycling hubs across the country with Tubex. So basically, a landowner can receive a dumpy sack to put their shelters in, and there's information about how best to stack the shelters into a bag as well. And then they take that dumpy sack to a particular central hub, central collection point, and then whoever is operating that hub, which is usually, a charitable organisation, or a partner like the National Trust, or kind of Woodland Trust, will then ensure that those tubes are removed from that site and taken down to Tubex, where they are made into new tree shelters. It's a project that's taken a while to get going. There's been a various sort of trials about how to do it. We've tried various ways of making it easy for the landowner to remove those shelters, and to try and take out as much of the logistics as possible. So we tried the doorstop collections, but there's obviously a cost involved in that, and actually having the landowner take them to a collection site which is pretty much near to them seems to be the best way of doing it. And last year, at least 350,000 shelters were removed and recycled across the country. And it doesn't sound a lot when you think about the amount of kind of virgin plastic shelters which are being put out there at the moment, but it's a start. And obviously there are plans to upscale and get more hubs across the country and also into Scotland. So at the moment there's just around about 20 recycling hubs available. And if people head to the Forest Plastic Working Group website or to Tubex website, they'll see where those hubs are. You can see which is nearest to you and see when it's open as well. So not all of the hubs are actually open throughout the season. Some of them have like really short windows to get your stuff to as well, and that's because of economies of scale and things like that. But there is at least now, if you've got a shelter in a woodland, you can actually take that to a hub and be assured that it is being recycled in the correct way, and also not being sent off to some far-flung country abroad for kind of out of sight, out of mind, and it's their problem, not ours. There is a kind of proper traceability of where this stuff is being recycled, and that's something you mentioned early on, Katie, wasn't it? That kind of traceability of what we're doing. Yeah,
and that's so awesome that the hubs are even a thing, and that this project is going ahead. And we can put the links to the Forest Plastics Working Group and the Tubex website, and there's a map on the Tubex website where you can find your hub, so we'll put that in the show notes, won't we, Mike?
Yes.
But yeah, and it is about, I think that people need to understand as well, if you're going to use this product, you need to be mindful that there's going to come a time where you need to remove them, which, as we've spoken about much in this podcast, is quite a task to do that, especially if your trees have grown to be quite bushy. And also, yes, getting them to a recycling hub, which is obviously so much better than leaving them to be plastic pollution, taking them to landfill. Or I also know, Mike, of instances where people have just dug a big hole and put them in there and buried them. And I know where people have had big fires as well, and burnt them, which, as we know, burning plastic is not good for you or the atmosphere at all. So no, it's a really awesome initiative that you guys have started up.
Yeah, and we are aware that there are issues with the scheme as well. It's something that we're kind of 4 years into it now, and we are trying to iron out some of the issues. The hubs can't stay open all the time. That is a big issue for people. So they are almost set a deadline of 3 or 4 days to get somewhere, and people leave busy lives, and removing plastic from a woodland on a farm is not high up on a farmer's kind of priority list. So we know that there's little kind of teething problems, and we're also working on a similar hub system for spiral guards as well. The kind of PVC spiral guards which are out there. We'll probably talk about that in a future episode, but they are really notoriously difficult to bring in. Very easy to recycle, but really difficult to remove from hedges.
Oh, they break apart.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not, using volunteers to do that. That's not potentially is not a pretty job, is it? And it has some health and safety issues as well. And Katie, I think it's probably fair to mention, there's other types of woodland waste, and if waste is the right term, but there's other types of woodland waste that I would like to bring into the project as well. So stakes is an issue as well. most of the stakes that we use, have some kind of coating on them, some kind of treatment to make sure that they last. And ideally, they shouldn't be left on site. But at the moment, there seems to be no way to actually recycle those. So that is something that we'd like to look at in the future. But yeah, I guess what we're saying here is, if you've got shelters on your site, you don't have to burn them, you don't have to bury them, you don't have to dump them. Stick them in a dumpy sack and get them to one of the recycling hubs.
Perfect. Yeah. And also, if the hub that I helped organise this year at Essex Wildlife Trust, it was our second year, went really well. We had people drop off their tree guards from hedgerows, from woodland creation projects, from orchards, from vineyards, a whole range of planting schemes. So yeah, you can all use it, all use the hubs. That's what they're there for.
So Katie, we've got the hubs, and we know with the landowners we work with, we can signpost people to those hubs. But what about schemes that, perhaps the land has transferred ownership 3 or 4 times, ones that are kind of on top of a fell somewhere, when the public walk through kind of, I guess, municipal parks and things like that, is there a way that we can actually track where those shelters are and then be able to, I guess, target some cleanup operations?
Well, that is one of the biggest challenges really that we face, is, like you say, where is this waste in the environment? Where have these legacy schemes been? Or so many people do planting on their own, not even using grant funding, so you can't really track it unless the landowner knows it. But like you say, it might pass over to new ownership. And we have had decades and decades of planting using tree shelters. It's around 40 years now, isn't it, Mike? Is it 40
Wow,
years
yeah.
of part of planting? Yeah. So that's a lot of plastic out there, and obviously a lot of it has been removed. But as some of you may know, if you've walked around a woodland or along an old hedgerow or something, you might still see remnants of tree guards, and not just tree guards as well. You've got like the weed suppressant sheeting that's been used a lot of the time, especially in hedgerows and things, fencing that's been there for decades, all this waste that's sort of been out there for a long period of time. But focusing on tree guards, that is the thing of where actually are they? So how can we actually signpost people towards the hubs? How can we signpost people towards local volunteer groups that we know, or corporate groups that go out and remove these plastics? So what we did was we've come up with a app called Plot That Plastic. And so the origin of this app came from me at university, wandering around thinking, oh my goodness, there's so much plastic out here. I wonder if anyone's actually gonna bring this in, because it all looks very old and gnarly. And I was doing a GIS module at university, and me and my partner were mapping trees on this on survey 123, and we were chatting about plastics, and he just said, oh, wouldn't it be good if we could use this to map where the tree guards are, so someone could bring them in the future. I was like, that's such a good idea. Fast forward a few years, and working with the Forest Plastics Working Group, and managed to get some funding from Essex County Council and the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust to actually put this app together. So it allows us to be able to map where plastic tree guards are in the environment across the whole of the UK. And now one of the biggest things of this app is that it is a citizen science project. So it's not just foresters or people who work in woodlands to be able to use it. It's for everybody. So the general public, you go out walking a dog or cycling through the forest, or just a general walk in your local area, you can map where tree guards are, and that's all types of tree guards. So like what we've spoken about across the different types of planting, so orchards, vineyards, hedgerows, woodlands, a lot of the roadside planting that you see across the the motorways and things, and all the different types of plastic tree guards, the spirals, the tube shelters, the vole guards. We're also asking people to map the non-plastic tree guards as well, because or as I say, non-plastic could be bioplastic, or it's hard to decipher between them. But because we need to know where they are as well, because the research is still ongoing with them. We don't know actually if they're any better, or what they do in the soils compared to plastic as well. So we need to know that too. But hopefully the aim is, by gathering all this data, we can then build a picture of what it looks like, and then best place hubs across the country if we know there's like an accumulation in a certain area. But also this data can be shared within organisations and landowners, so they can club together to remove it. Charitable organisations can help send volunteer groups to help remove it. There's so much that can be done with it, but the biggest thing is knowing where it is. So that is the whole point of this app, which is to try and pinpoint that. And once upon a time, it was actually thought, and it was actually advertised, that leaving a plastic shelter in the environment when they first came around was okay, and that it would break down into nothing, because that's what we thought they did. They broke down. We didn't know about microplastics and things, but now, with years of research into plastic pollution, microplastics, and obviously the god that is Sir David Attenborough highlighting it across the world with his documentaries and things, we now know that we need to be removing this product from the environment, and also looking into other types of products as well, and whether it's okay to leave them out. So hopefully this app will build that data set, and we can do some really cool things with it.
That sounds really good, Katie. So how do people get on the app? And is it just something you can download? Is it something that anybody can do?
Yeah, everyone can do it. So you can go on your app store, or whatever it is on the type of phone you have. You download the app Survey 123, and we can put the link in the show notes. And then with that, it's called Plot That Plastic. So it's a project within that app. And then you don't need to sign up or anything like that. You just go onto it, and you can submit as many times as you want. We also have a dashboard as well, which we'll put the link to in the show notes as well. You can click on that, and it will give you a live update of how many submissions there have been, how many tree guards have been mapped so far. So far we've got 1.1 million tree guards have been mapped, and I think this project's only been going a few months, so that's a lot. It goes to show how much is out there. You can use the dashboard to filter through things, have a look at certain types of plastic. Also, if you are a landowner or a land manager, and you've submitted your plastic tree guards on there, you can, if you have removed them, you can use the dashboard to go on there and click on it and say, yep, I've removed these now, and it will take it off of the map. So there's some really cool stuff that you can do with it. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward to download, and the main aim of it is, once you've got it up on your phone and you want to map a tree guard or a group of tree guards, it should be super quick for you to do it. You should be able to do it within a couple of minutes. There's not a huge amount of questions, and then there's also an option for you to upload a photo on there as well, which obviously is helpful for us to see exactly what type of tree guard it is, especially if you're not sure whether it is a plastic or a non-plastic one.
Right. Oh, that sounds fantastic. And like I say, 1.1 million shelters already mapped. So yeah, the more data we get, the better. I think for me, Katie, we've said before that we've got more than 20 hubs out there, and some of those hubs are not used as well as the other ones. And I think I've perhaps alluded to before that normally if you've got a person on the ground next to those hubs get really busy. The one that you helped in Essex was busy because you were there making sure it was busy. So I could be doing the other hubs a little bit of disservice. They could be in the wrong place, of course, but without that data set, we can't put the hubs in the areas where they're needed and they can be best used, and then we can make sure that landowners have got a decent option. So it's absolutely fantastic, but it's only as good as the data. You only get in what you get. You only get out what you put in, don't you? Really. So it's important that people use it. It's important that we get as much data as possible. Let us sift through the data. If you're not sure, if you've seen a tube out somewhere, you think, oh well, should I just bother putting these one or two on there? Let us worry about that. We'll sift through the data. But yeah, as much as you can do, the listeners to this podcast and your friends, family, people within the sector, more people who use it, the better.
Exactly. Everyone can use it. And again, we could do all this stuff with that data. And also, if we can highlight how much of an issue it is, we can hopefully put it towards policy changes within organisations to make wider changes as well. So yeah, please download the app and get plotting that plastic. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And I've really enjoyed that chat, Mike.
Yeah, it has been good. Probably not as slick as our usual efforts, Katie, but we really wanted to. Well, I'm talking on my part there, not yours, because you're brilliant as usual. But yeah, it's perhaps not as slick as it has been in the past from my side. But we really wanted to get this podcast out and just show what is happening and how the sector is coming together to look at its own use of these materials and how they can be recycled in such an important week for recycling.
Say, and don't, no, you were wonderful. Don't say such things. Don't say such things. No, and we thought we would make the most of Recycling Week by popping in the bonus episode. But we do have our next episode coming out, within the next few weeks, I believe. Mike, what's it on?
That's right. Yeah, if you remember from episode 3, we interviewed the wonderful Ben Harrower, who was using kind of drone technology to see where browsing animals were. And there was a question posed in that podcast, I think it's from yourself, Katie, about, how can we almost do something similar for kind of small mammals and what sort of impact small mammals like voles and rabbits can have on woodland creation. So that's what we're going to be looking at in the next episode, and hopefully have a special guest on too.
Yes, we do indeed. Excellent. Well, we'll see you then, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Yeah, not too bad. Like this autumnal weather. I know we always talk about the weather, don't we? But
we do. We're so British.
we're close to planting season, aren't we? It's the key time of the year
exactly.
For woodies. So for woodies, you don't like woodies. I think woodies is good. It's going to be very difficult to edit out your laughing.
Woody so many times. Sorry, that's made me laugh so much.
Woodies.